Hey folks, Doug Blake with Body Design University, and in today's video, I want to clear up in chapter 10 some confusion related to two of the tables 1025 and table 1027. This is in that part of the chapter where we're talking about the muscular strength assessments. One is the true 1RM assessment for the bench press and squat, and then the other is the submaximal. So basically, the idea is that if you're going to do 1RM testing, you can do it in one of two ways. You can do a true 1RM test, which is literally with these two exercises, taking a client to the point where at some point during the assessment, they literally are able to only do one repetition. That's a true 1RM. So whatever that weight is, they can't do any more than that. That's great. That is their max weight for that, or their personal best for that particular exercise. Considering the fact that we very seldom ever do 1RM testing with anybody other than a power lifter, like a competitive power lifter, you definitely want to do some 1RM testing with them. Not often, but I have done it, but it's just not very often. With clients, average clients, I never do it. Would never even consider doing it. And not only that, I would never even do submaximal testing, but it's in their textbook. So you got to know the material, and it's helpful if you have a really fit client that does want to do it. Then you can do a submaximal test. Why? Because a submax test simply allows you to predict what that number would have been if they actually did a true 1RM. But you don't do true 1RMs because the injury potential is very high. That's all it is. Otherwise, you'd be doing 1RMs with folks if they wanted to. But instead of putting somebody under these extreme workloads of, excessively heavy weights, you use less weight and perform more repetitions, and then you predict what the 1RM would be. If somebody really wants to know what their max bench press would be, well, look, we could do it, and you might hurt yourself, or we can keep the weight a little bit lower, and then we can predict what it is. And that's all ACE is doing. But there is some confusion here on the tables, table 1025, table 1027. I hear it regularly, and I just heard it again from a student. And which one do we use for testing purposes? And generally, it's pretty straightforward. When you're talking about maximal test, max 1RM testing, you're going to use table 1025. For sub-maximal strength assessments, you're going to use table 1027, which is back here on page 456. So let me just start with that. Okay, we'll keep it really simple. When going through the muscular strength assessments for 1RM, you use table 1025, and you use it just as a predictive measure to help you to determine what weight you want to use for their first official attempt after their warm-ups. So that's what table 1025 is designed for. Table 1027, as you can see here, is designed for sub-maximal testing. So once an individual has, and the protocol is right here in front of you, right here on page 455, when you're doing submaximal testing, you're going to use, and it's, again, submaximal testing is for two exercises, right? Bench press and squat. And what table 1027 allows you to do is to, once the client has attempted at a certain weight, these number of repetitions, you can stop. You don't have to continue to do more and more reps unless they hit their repetition range with the weight that was their personal best. You could always increase. But as soon as the repetition goes below the number of repetitions that they are normally accustomed to doing, and they give you an example of Mary, who normally does 8 repetitions in submax. Once that weight that they're using, as you increased it, forces them to do fewer repetitions, now you can use the numbers that are found on table 1027 to predict their 1 rep max. So let's start here very simply with understanding that table 1025 is what you're going to use when you're doing the actual protocol. Let me go back and show you what I'm talking about, and you'll understand why. I think there might be a little editing issue here. Can't be 100% sure, but that's just my guess. If you go to page 449, doing the bench press protocol, They're going to tell you 1 set, 2 sets, 3 sets. On their 3rd set, you're going to be using a weight that allows them to do maybe 2 to 3 repetitions. Okay. Once they do 2 to 3 repetitions with this heavier weight on set number 3, now it's time to take a step back, give them a rest, and make their first attempt. I hope you get the idea. They've done 3 essentially warm-up sets, okay, for their max assessment. Now you've got to make a decision. How much should I now make my first attempt? How much should my weight be? Well, you can use table 1025 to kind of get a educated guess on it. In other words, how many reps and how much weight did the individual use, right, to hit their 3rd set, right? And so that's what you're seeing right here. Based on the client's 3rd set, determine the next workload by using table 1025. Well, exactly what do you do? Well, if you know what their weight was based on their 3rd set, you know what weight they used. Okay, let's say it's 100 pounds or 100. It doesn't matter what the number is. Now you can look at table 1025 and say to yourself, well, they did 2 reps with 100 pounds. They did 2 reps. Get back down there. 2 reps with 100 pounds. That 100 pounds is approximately 95% of their 1 rep max. What they're telling you is that you can calculate what their first attempt is going to be by simply taking, let's say it's 100 pounds, and dividing by 0.95 because it's a percent, and that's going to give you a higher number. So if you want to calculate out what, let's do that. Let me just pull up this calculator. And they do 100 pounds divided by 0.95. It's 105.26 pounds. What is that telling me? That means that I'm going to, on my first attempt, let me go back here. On my first attempt, based on the client's 3rd set, 100 pounds, right? 2 repetitions, determine the next workload. Well, my next workload, because of table 1025, is going to be 105 pounds. And I'm going to do 105 pounds. Does that make sense? In other words, I didn't just guess. I used table 1025 to help me decide what that first attempt is going to be. Get it? 3 sets, warms me up. Now I've got to make a decision. What's going to be my first attempt workload? 1025 helps me to do that because I did 2 sets on my 3rd, 2 reps on my 3rd set. It could have been 3 reps. It doesn't matter what the number is. I'm going to use table 1025 to now make a determination. If they did 2 reps or 3 reps with this weight, well, their max is probably pretty close to this. That's what table 1025 does for you. Hope that makes sense. So that's your max. And so here's where I'm a little bit unsure of whether or not they had a little editing. I don't know. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this. But when we get to the 1 rep squat assessment, the very same protocols apply pretty close. But you'll notice if you read through here, what don't you see on this bullet points? Based on the client's 3rd set, determining the next workload to find the client's, determine the next workload to find the client's 1 RM effort. Now, it could be that they don't want you to use table 1025 for the squat. I don't know. Seems kind of odd, doesn't it? Once again, remember what we saw here. After the client, look, it's the same thing. If the client is successful, based on the client's blah, blah, determine the workload, the client, blah, blah, blah. And notice what they have here. The next sentence. The 1 RM chart provided in table, blah, 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 can be used to make these calculations. Burn that in your head for a second, because you'll notice that on this bullet point, they don't have that. Here's where I'm a little unsure whether or not they meant to put that in there, because when you go to page 455, what do you see? You see that sentence? This is what confuses people. Why is this sentence in here when they've just been talking about table 1027? My assumption, I could be wrong, my assumption, and this is why I want to clear up the confusion for you. My assumption is that this sentence I don't know, probably belonged here. If that's the case, then it pretty much clears it up for you, and hopefully they'll make the change in the next edition. Okay. At the end of the day, you're simply going to use 1025 as a predictive measure to determine what the next or what their first attempt at their 1 rep max is going to be, because the next thing, same thing here on the squat, explain the assessment protocol, warm up effort, same thing as the bench press, right? Client will rest 2 minutes, use following guidelines, maybe 10, 20%. It's the squat, so you can use heavy weight. Just like on the bench press, 1 heavy set of 2 to 3 reps, rest, right? It's the same thing. That was their 3rd set. So based on that 3rd set, how do I now determine what my first attempt is going to be? Go to table 1025. If with that heavier weight, they did 3 repetitions, maybe they got 4 repetitions, use table 1025 to make that first attempt recommendation, right? Now it's whatever weight you're going to use. And you simply use that. And that's where perhaps that meant that should have been this guy right here, this sentence right here, probably fits back in. Okay, so let's just pretend that that is the case. That should clear things up for you, because once you now get to the submax strength assessment, it's basically going to be table 1027, right? And all of your focus is on 1027. If there are questions related to this on the test, more than likely you're not going to be, there's probably not going to be any confusion. I've never heard anybody talk about there being confusion. Again, as soon as you hit here, don't look to table 1025. Basically, okay? All this here speaks to, I think, for the most part, it's pretty clear that right now, if you were to remove this sentence and put it where it belongs, which is on the squat assessment, max assessment, now you'll see that we're having Mary, who normally completes 8 repetitions with 100 pounds on the bench press, 150 pounds on the squat. Now we can make the determination for a predicted 1 rep max, because now you're not going to look at this and go, oh, wait a minute, do I need to use table 1025 or 1027? Well, it's 1027. And so, look, for the most part, if we do that, read it like that for me and see if that helps. It has for the folks that I've already explained this to multiple times. And perhaps if you were to put it back, it then makes sense also for the squat assessment. Okay, so maybe some folks from ACE can correct me, I guess. If not, then maybe on the next edition, they'll move that text into that area. Or if it does belong there, okay, well, I'm confused as well. So table 1025 and table 1027, table 1025 is used as a predictive measure to determine that weight that you'll want to try for their first attempt in the bench and the squat, right? You're gonna try their first attempt after they've warmed up for 3 sets, and you use that 3rd set, right, to help gauge what their first attempt weight is for the 1RM. So that's 1025. Man, I'm just going to knock that out. Boom, 1 rep, and then you continue with that protocol. But submaximal testing, you're simply going to attempt these many repetitions with this amount of weight, because that's what you're normally accustomed to doing. And it's going to be a personal best that you're going to try out with, right? You're going to warm it up, but just do one. Now try a little bit heavier weight, right? And if you can't get 8 repetitions like you were expecting to do, and you try it and you get 6, and that's it, boom. Well, there you go. Now you just use the protocol on table 1027. It's 100. You did 100 pounds for 8 reps. You made it a little bit heavier. You went to 110. And you weren't able to get 8 reps, you only got 6. Well, now go to table 1027 and use the coefficients that they have in there, right? You just multiply that number, and that's probably a good estimate of 1 rep max. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, please let us know. Look, if you want to have access and more information to our exam prep. Now, look, our exam prep actually has chapter by chapter videos, audios. We've got quizzes. We got the practice exams. If you want more information and you do want to actually access that, just click on the link below that you're seeing here. Please go ahead and also subscribe to our channel. Click the notification bell so that you know when the new information comes out. And if you haven't done so already, head over to our private Facebook group. Okay, we've got over 10,000 folks in our private group, and you can ask questions and get camaraderie from all the folks that are in there, because they're also trying and studying to pass their ACE exam. As always, it's a pleasure. Again, if you got questions, leave them in the comment section below, and we will see you next week. Take care.